Today on Pots and Trowels, I'm going to be answering some of your gardening questions and pruning down the pelargoniums for winter. And that's brought to you with the support of Allett and Cobra Garden. Hello Molly. Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. Well, first of all, an apology. We did say we would be doing live tonight from the conservatory. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, Sean can't be with us, so he's not here to do all that technical side for us. So it's just me and Jill, but I am still going to answer some of the questions that you'd sent in preparation for that, and we will do a live Pots and Trowels in a couple of weeks' time. So first of all, I've got a message here from Linda, who lives near Newark in Nottinghamshire. It's from her mum, Muriel Sprigg. Muriel, I've known for many years. She used to listen to John Sterling and I on the radio and come to events. So hello Muriel, hope you're keeping well. First question is from Angela Hebden. She wants to know what to do with the patches on her lawn following leather jackets, and when is the best time to seed. Well, leather jackets are the larvae of daddy longlegs, which you probably see flying around in September time. They lay their eggs in the lawn in the summer, and you get these sort of greyish browny grubs which are known as leather jackets, and they feed on the grass roots, and if you get a heavy infestation it can weaken the grass or even kill patches. Another problem we get, of course, is chafer grubs from the cockchafer beetle. They can also have a devastating effect on the lawn. Really, the only way to control them is there are no chemicals available now that work on them, but what you can get is a nematode that you water into the lawn, but it's a bit late in the season because the soil needs to be fairly warm. So you would normally do that maybe July, August and into September, and that will control them effectively. So that's something to bear in mind for next year. But for now, any bare patches where the grass is a bit thin, then what you can do is just rake that soil a little bit loose, sprinkle a bit of fresh seed on it, and there's just about time for it to germinate. The soil isn't that cold yet, even though the air temperatures are dropping, the soil is still warm, so it should germinate within 10 to 14 days and green over in time for the winter. So good luck with that. Trudy White says, hi Martin and crew. Well, it's only me and Jill today, small crew. Can you advise on black spot on roses this summer? Trudy bought several new potted red roses from a garden centre, and they've been planted individually into new containers with John Innes or specialist rose and shrub compost. Unfortunately, most have got some black spot on in varying degrees, and Trudy's removed and destroyed all the affected leaves from the plant and those that are on the soil. They're in new compost, they haven't been fed yet, but Trudy would like some advice on feeding in the future. Plus, are there any red roses that are resistant to black spot? Well, black spot is quite a damaging disease on roses. It's very easy to identify. Healthy green leaves will take on a paler colour, and these dark brown black blotches will appear, black spots its name, and that's what it looks like, and then they'll often go yellow, the leaves will, and fall off. So it's one that's very easy to identify. First rule of thumb with all of these diseases is to pick off infected leaves. It spreads very quickly from the spores, so pick them off the plant. Any that fall on the floor, get rid of them. Burn them, put them in the dustbin, but certainly don't put them on the compost heap, otherwise it spreads. And then for next year, what I would suggest is you probably use a fungicide if you're happy to use one. A fungicide won't kill insects, it will just kill fungal spores, but you need to start early in the season. That's the secret. So when you prune them in March time to encourage that flush of new growth, and you get those lovely new shoots about an inch long, that is when you spray them. And you've got to spray them little and often through the first part of the summer. That's when most of the damage is done, and that should hopefully keep them nice and clean and healthy. Some years it's worse than others. If we get a really dry, warm summer, it's not as much of a problem as if we get sort of a moist summer and lots of rain. So do that. As for disease resistance, there's quite a lot of roses nowadays that claim to have disease resistance, but it doesn't mean they are completely immune to it. So again, it depends on the weather. So even a resistant variety is likely to get a little bit of black spot. But a couple of red ones that I think are worth growing, both of these are hybrid tea roses. One of them is called Thinking of You, which is a lovely title for a rose, and the other one is Alex Red, and they've got a good resistance to it. So try those. And when it comes to feeding, don't feed now. It's getting late in the season, Trudy. I would wait until spring when you've pruned them, give them a rose feed mixed into the surface of the compost, and that will give them that boost to make that new growth that they need. next question is from another Trudy. This time it's Trudy Webster from Nottinghamshire, who had the most beautiful heuchera pink fizz that's been in flower in a pot outside the conservatory all summer long. A couple of weeks ago it looked like something was nibbling it, so Trudy investigated thinking it might be slugs or snails, but the whole top of the plant detached from the root. Wants to know what the problem is. Well, it's not slugs and snails, it's going to be vine-weevil damage, and these are little cream coloured grubs that live in the soil. The beetle will have laid the eggs earlier on in the summer. They hatch out and they feed on plant roots of things like heucheras, begonias, fuchsias, ivy and many more plants. And what they do with heucheras, they feed in that fleshy root where it meets the stalk at soil level, and when they've eaten 2/3 of the way through, it will rot and then the top will detach exactly as you've described it. So typical damage. Two ways you can control. One is to use a vine-weevil nematode. Mentioned it a little bit earlier with the leather jackets, but a bit late in the season for that, and that the damage has been done, but bear that in mind for next year. Or you could use an insecticide. There are soil drench insecticides that you can use for vine weevil, so do that and it will be fine in the future, but it's not slugs and snails that's caused the problem. Dee Godden has been in touch to say that she can't watch tonight because it's her husband's birthday and they're out celebrating, so happy birthday to Dee's husband. But she's got two questions. First one is, what can she plant this time of the year in the veg garden? Well, it's a little bit limited really, Dee, at this time of the year, because obviously the summer veg have finished. The winter veg that we're going to harvest soon were planted a couple of months ago, but you could probably get away with a few spring cabbages or kale plants if you can still find them in a nursery or garden centre. I saw some only last week in a garden centre. It's quite late, but if you plant them in, put a cloche over them, that will bring them on a little bit, and although they won't get to be as big as the ones that were planted a while ago, you'll still get some greens. You could plant the overwintering onion sets that you can still get in garden centres. Plant them now and you can harvest those next summer, early time. Or you could plant garlic in the garden now as cloves, put those in. They like to be planted at this time of the year so that they will then overwinter and grow away again in the spring. And maybe some salad leaves. If you've got some packets of salad leaves, just sprinkle a few. You've got nothing to lose, and if the weather stays mild, you'll get those. So have a go with those. Your other question is, when can you start moving and splitting plants in the garden? Well, things like hostas and herbaceous perennials that are dying down now, as soon as the foliage has gone yellow, chop it down to ground level, dig up that clump, carefully tease it apart or chop it if it's a tough root, plant it so that it's got time to re-establish before the winter. So basically any time now you can start lifting and dividing. Question here from Chris Corduroy. He says, hi Martin, I need to move a largish hydrangea, and when and how is the best time to do it? Well, I would give it probably another month or so. The leaves are still quite green on hydrangeas. Everything seems late this year. We're not getting the autumn colour yet. It's because of the weather, I'm sure. So you've got to wait really until the leaves have fallen off. So as soon as the leaves fall off, that plant is then dormant and you can lift it. And hydrangeas move really well. They've got a fibrous root system that isn't too deep. So what I would do with it is, once the leaves have fallen off, I would probably prune it down just to reduce some of the top growth a little bit. Then get your spade and push it in around the edge so that you're lifting it with a good root ball of soil attached. Prepare your new hole, mix in a little bit of organic matter, garden compost, just to improve the soil conditions. Plant it at the same level, firm it in so that it's not going to rock around, and give it a good watering can of water. You might think the ground's moist, but that just settles the soil around those disturbed roots, and that's it then. Leave it alone and hopefully it will root over the autumn and winter, and in spring will grow away. We'll even know that it's been moved. Edie says, hi Martin, what kind of green vegetables can I grow from seed in my brand new glass house this autumn? Would rocket and spinach seeds sprout now? I'm in Edinburgh, many thanks for your advice. Well, a little bit like Dee's advice on growing veg, it's getting quite late in the season, but you've got the advantage of a brand new glass house, which I think is so exciting to get a glass house at this time of the year, so you can start getting things ready for next year. So because you're going to get that little bit of warmth in there when the sun shines, then I think you could get away with a few things. Lots of salads, you know, you mentioned spinach, you've mentioned rocket there, the cut and come lettuces, mizuna's a good one, so they could all be sown in trays and you'll get fresh fresh leaves that you can harvest. Spinach is another one, and chard. You won't get mature plants, but you can harvest them as baby leaves. And if you've got any old packets of things like radishes or beetroot kicking about, or even cabbages, sow those in trays, and when they're about an inch tall, harvest them as microgreens, and they are absolutely delicious and really, really good for you. So I think there's quite a bit you could be starting off with there and get a harvest as we go into winter time. And then finally, a question here from Jim, who wants to know what to do with his pelargoniums. He's got them in pots and he wants to keep them for next year. So what does he do with them to keep them alive? Well, I've got a couple of plants here. These are going to get the treatment that you need to give to yours, ideally, because they've finished flowering now. We can see there's just the odd flower on them, but they've pretty much flowered right the way from June until now. So it's time to give them a rest, and they've finished now for the season. So what we do with these are regal pelargoniums, but you can do this with the zonal and the fancy leaf pelargoniums as well. Treat them all the same at this time of the year, is to prune them down. And that does two things. It stops them growing, but it means they don't need as much space to be overwintered. So literally what I'm going to do is cut it down. Here's one that I've already done, so you can see that's been cut quite hard back. And what I'm going to do with this one is just go over it, and it is quite severe pruning. I'm just cutting back into the old wood, so I'm essentially cutting off all the growth that it's made this year back to where it came from. You don't have to be too precise. We can tidy this up again in the spring, but it's reducing all that foliage and getting rid of it. So that can go like that. And then what we do is pick off any yellow leaves just to tidy it up, any growth or weeds like that. So we can see we've reduced that back. Any little dead bits, there's a little dead bit there that I'm just going to prune off there with the secateurs. Any little stumps we can see like that. So quite a severe prune. We've taken it right the way back to that old wood. Now what we do with that now is we need to stand that somewhere frost free and keep the compost not dry, but only just moist. And this is quite dry. We haven't watered for a week or so. So I would try and keep it like that. If it gets very dry, then I'd just give it a little bit of water just to keep it ticking over. And what will happen is if we keep this somewhere light and frost free, it will make new shoots, and then come the spring it will grow away. So it could be a frost-free greenhouse, a conservatory, or even a cool windowsill will be ideal for that. And then finally, if you've got all this new growth and you've got a little propagator or even a sunny windowsill, somewhere that's warmish, you can take some cuttings from this. Getting a bit late in the season, but it's worth a go, isn't it, if you've got the cutting material there. So what I'm going to do using a knife is just trim that to just 2 to 3 inches long, and then just remove these lower leaves. I've trimmed it just below a leaf joint there. I'm going to take the leaves off, so I'm left with just a couple of leaves on the top like that. We don't need to leave too many, otherwise it will wilt. Take off these little fleshy bits along the stem, and there we have it, our pelargonium cutting. Small plant pot, just a couple of inches in diameter. Fill it with a multi-purpose compost, push it in so it's about half and half like that. Just keep it moist, that's all you need to do, and that will root over the winter if it's kept nice and warm, and that will produce a new plant next year. So we'll get the original plant bursting into growth, and then we've got some young plants like that that we can carry on with. So there you go. Hopefully we've answered your questions, a few tips on pelargoniums, so plenty to be doing this autumn. Well, thank you for watching Pots and Trowels, and thank you for the questions that you sent in. Next week, we're going to be dealing with the citrus and getting them inside to give them some winter protection. So we'll see you then. Bye.